About 2 minutes to start time here, 2 minutes. Tell me what's going on in the chat box. Let me know if you guys have questions. Hello, how's it going, guys? I've got 7 o'clock Eastern time, which means it is time to kick this thing off. Welcome to Free GMAT Prep Hour. I'll be your host, Jeff Vollmer. Yeah, I do these every so often. I've got another one coming up in November, another one coming up in December, and I think I'm alternating with someone else. So we invite you to come to these free GMAT prep hours whenever you have the time. If you can't come to attend them live, they usually end up on our YouTube channel about a week afterwards. So if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for checking in. In addition to free GMAT prep hour, just want to make sure you're aware of a couple other options you have for resources that are completely free. We would love to see you at one of our in-person classes for session 1. Yeah, all of our full courses are 9 sessions long, and you are able to attend the first session of our course. Just need to sign up for a trial class on our website. Just pick a time that works for you. Maybe read about the instructors a little bit of your class and try to see who's going to be a good fit. We'd also encourage you to come to more than one trial class to figure out what type of teaching style resonates with you the most. So definitely take advantage of that. And if you are more like a self-starter, you should check out our Interact on Demand course. There's a kind of a trial version of that where you can kind of see what the structure at the beginning of Interact is like. It assigns homework for you to do between videos, things like that. And that would be a great option if maybe you can't commit to an entire class and the schedule of class demands, but you can make time for studying on your own. So go ahead and check those out for sure. And if you haven't taken a practice exam, take our first practice exam online too. That's free. Get some data and see what you need to work on. Before we launch into material today, let me just get some thoughts and comments in chat. Like, how are we doing? Does anyone have an exam coming up? 'Tis the season for round 2. People are furiously studying and taking the exam here. And I just wanted to see if you guys have any like big picture questions that I might be able to get in front of here before we get to the content today. Good question comes in. Jeff, how many questions from geometry should you expect to see in the quant section? I would say the over under is probably 3.5. Like it wouldn't be impossible for there to be like only 2 or 3, and it wouldn't be impossible for there to be 5. I would say, yeah, 3 or 4 is probably most common. And some of those, like one of those might not be like kind of classic geometry, but like involving lines and stuff in the coordinate plane. Yeah, but I'd say 3.5 or so. Yeah, what kind of another kind of question that comes into chat, and I think a lot of people have questions related to this, but if I'm striving for a 700 or a score that starts with a 7, or an 8, and my practice test was like pretty far below that, how much hope is there? Like how many points can you gain, from day 1 to the last day? And I think that depends on a bunch of things. I would say when you took like your initial practice test, how much studying had you done, right? The less studying you had done prior to taking your first practice test, the more room you have to grow. But if your first practice test was after you studied for 6 months, then you probably have less of a less room to improve there. I think in general, look, a 700 score is already like close to a 90th percentile score. So, it is just really tough to score that highly. I don't like saying that, some people can never do it or everybody can do it. But what I would like to say is I think you won't start hitting your limit, like getting close to your score potential before you put in like 150 hours of studying. So if you've only been studying for like 10 hours and you're like still feeling like you're really far away from your score goal, yeah, you probably should be, because it's going to take a lot longer than that to reach your potential. So you got to get to triple-digit hours of studying, probably, I don't know, maybe even closer to 200 hours than 100. And then you'll start to see kind of like where the crest is. Good stuff. Keep those questions coming. I don't mind sticking around a little bit after the session and answering a couple more of those, because I know a lot of questions from a lot of different areas that you want to have for me, you want to ask me, and I can't really answer them all right now, because we are going to focus on a single topic. We are going to focus on comparisons today. Yeah, we're gonna take a Robert, hit me up with that question at the end. I don't think I'll remember it, but hit me up with that question at the end and I'll give you some feedback. Yeah, comparisons. So a big kind of section of sentence correction. And we're going to talk about maybe some ways to think about comparisons and how to kind of check to make sure that our comparisons are proper. We think of comparisons as like a really important subset of parallelism in a way. There are some kind of connective elements between those two topics. And so I'm gonna go ahead and do the dorky thing here and introduce you to comparisons through parallelism. This sentence: some of the most commonly tested areas within sentence correction questions are modifiers, parallelism, and comparisons. Yes, it's meta-parallelism, where we're talking about parallelism in a list. And so what we kind of understand in parallelism is, look, whenever you make a list, you need to make sure that all the items, we call them elements, the elements in the list are balanced, right? And there are really important signal words for parallelism, right? Like the word "and" is like the most common word for parallelism. It's like, I don't know, a top 5 word in the English language. So like we use parallelism all the time. Whenever you use the word "and," you should be using proper parallelism. So when we see the word "and," we're making a list. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and check the elements in the list and make sure that they're like balanced in terms of grammatical structure, right, and meaning. So modifiers, parallelism, and comparisons, these are all topics, right? These are all areas that we know of in sentence correction. And so we can list them like so: modifiers, parallelism, comparisons. They're all kind of on the same plane of, types of concepts. And so a lot of people think that the topic of comparisons is similar to the topic of parallelism. And so what we're doing in this sentence is we are taking these two items and we're making a comparison, right? We are saying that one of the topics is kind of like another one of the topics. And so we are going to use a similar approach without making a comparison, but something it's going to be impossible to avoid because it is similar. We are going to look at these two elements in this comparison: the topic of parallelism and the topic of comparisons and say, look, these two things in the comparison are like parallel too, right? And so what we need to be careful of when we're dealing with comparisons is that we're not just looking at, a noun, and another noun, but that the nouns have some logical connection to each other. And so we call this comparing apples to apples, right? I'm sure you've heard of that phrase before, or you've heard of the game, right? But that's not an apples to apples comparison. That you're comparing apples to oranges. And so what we say is, like, ideally a comparison is apples to apples. And occasionally you can get away with a comparison that's apples to oranges, because at least those are both types of fruit. And so they're like somewhat logically similar. But one of the other instructors who occasionally does this, these free GMAT prep hours, once said, like, yeah, we can compare apples to apples, and we might be able to compare apples to oranges, but you certainly can't compare apples to poverty, right? They're both nouns, but they have like nothing to do with one another. And so I remember when Dimitri Farber said that, I thought that was kind of clever, that like, yes, they're both nouns, but we still understand those nouns as having nothing to do with one another. So whenever you make a comparison, take a look at the two elements being compared and make sure they line up. Right? So here's another one. Parallelism is tested more often than comparisons. And what we're seeing is we also have signal words when we deal with comparisons, right? Not only signal words in parallelism, but also signal words when we deal with comparisons, right? And so we're saying, oh, we're comparing something to the topic of comparisons. That's going to be the topic of parallelism. So these are things to look out for when you're ever making a comparison, all right? Those are like some big picture things to keep in mind. And now I want to give you like a handful of sentences and ask you to kind of read them all down and see, are these good comparisons or are they problematic comparisons? So I've got 7 sentences here. Go ahead and take a couple minutes, read these down and ask yourself, like, which ones of these make proper comparisons and which ones of them make bad comparisons? I'll give you, I don't know, 2.5 minutes or so. I'm going to go ahead and number them. We're at about the halfway point. If you're here live, go ahead and chat me like privately which sentences you think have good comparisons. I'll just tell you, no one has gotten them all. No one has gotten them all yet. No, I still stand by that. I'll let you know when someone gets them all. All right, that's been 2.5 minutes. Cool. If you're watching the video online, you need more time, just go ahead and pause it here. All right. Oh, I got someone telling me like the reasons why things are proper and improper. Let's go look at option number one. Everyone in chat, give me a yes or no. Is this a good comparison? Is number one a good comparison? Yes or no? Cool, getting a bunch of yeses. I'm gonna say, oh, okay. I'm gonna say this one is a proper comparison. I'm gonna put a little heart next to it so we know it's good. We have a great comparison word in here, the word like. Unless like is being used as a verb, like in sentence 7 here, like is a signal word for a comparison, okay? And you can think of like as similar to, all right? Like equals similar to. So John, similar to his mother, has fiery red hair. And this is okay, This is a good comparison. When we're using the word like to make a comparison, what we need to do is we need to compare a noun to another noun, okay? And so the two kind of items that are being compared to are compared to one another are John and his mother. These are both nouns. They are both people. They are both people who can have fiery red hair. And so we are going to say that this is a legitimate comparison, okay? Even if you know someone named John who doesn't have fiery red hair, there is a potential that someone named John and has a mother and they both have fiery red hair. So this is a decent comparison, okay? Like compares nouns. John and his mother are both nouns. And so this is fine. Let's take a look at number 2. Oh, I see a handful of things coming into the Q&A, which I'll be honest, like I rarely ever see that. If you're telling me answers in the Q&A thing, just go see if you can open up the chat box. It might be under the More tab. I'll just go ahead and say what's up to everyone so you can see the chat box. Hello. But you can just respond in chat because I probably won't be able to catch all the Q&A items. Number 2, good comparison, yes or no? Oh, I like how Dom's just like ready with like the explanation. Cool. Guys, we are going to say that option 2 is not a good comparison. Okay. Again, like question 1, question 2, right? Or similar to question 1, question 2 has the word like in it. And so that's going to be our marker, right? And we need to make sure that we're comparing two nouns when we use like. Let's think about what's being compared in sentence 2. We're comparing Mary, who is a noun, and that's great. What are we comparing Mary to? What's the next noun? It's not Adam, right? Adam would be fine. You could say Mary is like Adam, probably not because they're both green, but you could say like Mary, Adam went to the high school across the street, something like that. So really the noun that we're comparing Mary to is the car. And these are not logically comparable. Yes, they're both nouns, but in no way would you compare Mary to a car. You don't compare a person to a vehicle. And you also wouldn't want to say like Mary is green, right? Adam's car is green, like Mary. Like Mary needs to go to the doctor, okay? So this is going to be an improper or a faulty comparison. Yeah, and if you ever get like, if you're thinking to yourself, well, like, I guess Mary could be green, there's basically a line in the official guide that says if you interpret a sentence as having a humorous meaning, that's not what's intended. They're basically just saying, we at the GMAT do not have a sense of humor. So this is going to be a faulty comparison because you can't compare Mary to a car, and Mary's definitely not green. Let's go take a look at number 3. Number 3, comparison, is it good or bad? Yes or no? Is it? I guess that's a horrible question. Is the comparison good in number 3? All right, this one we're more split on. Okay, I think this one, at least in chat, I'm getting multiple no's and multiple yeses. But this one is going to be another faulty comparison. Look at what Dom said. I like Dom's explanation. It compares Beethoven's music to Bach himself. And we have some options for making proper comparisons here. Like we could compare Beethoven directly to Bach, and we could compare Beethoven's music to box music. But as I tell my classes here, like while you can be consistent, you have to make sure you stay in your lane. Okay, you cannot kind of mix and match and compare Beethoven to Bach's music, or compare Beethoven's music to Bach. Right? You can't kind of crisscross those. You have to stay in your lane. So what's actually happening here is we are comparing, well, Beethoven's music to Bach the person, and that's going to be improper. What's the marker? What's the marker in sentence 3? Yeah, more than. Yeah, basically anytime you see the word than, not then, but than with an A, you're making a comparison, right? Faster than, taller than, oh, I have faster than, greater than, fewer than. Anytime you're saying the word than, you need to have a comparison. All right, let's look at number 4. Number 4 had a lot of disagreement. Is number 4's comparison good? Yes or no? Yeah, this one's definitely more of like a 50-50 thing. Tell me in chat what we're trying to compare in number 4. What are the 2 items we're trying to compare in number 4? I'm gonna go hide the rest of these for now while I'm able to write stuff down. Good. We're comparing 2 apartment sizes, right? We're comparing Valerie's apartment to Alexa's apartment. And so in general, like if this were written, Valerie's apartment, I'll just write it out, is more spacious than Alexa's apartment. Like that would be the kind of crystal clear way to make this a good comparison. Right? And again, you have more spacious than Valerie's apartment versus Alexa's apartment. And you likely won't see this comparison too often on the GMAT because it's too easy. There's like, everyone's going to think that this sentence has a good comparison. And so there's no like real way the GMAT's going to get you. So there's a couple other ways the GMAT could say this. They could say, yeah, Valerie's apartment is more spacious than Alexa's. Okay, and kind of what's implied here is the apartment, but it's not necessary. And so this is a fine way to say this, the comparison as well. Like these are both good, but they're likely too easy. Okay, they're still likely too easy, not going to cause too much confusion. So the GMAT's like preferred way to say this is to say it this way. Valerie's apartment is more spacious, than that of Alexa. And that sounds like you're probably not going to say that too often, you know, in everyday language. It sounds a little stuffy, I don't know. But that's one of the reasons why the GMAT will test it, is because it's harder to hear that this is correct than these ones are. And so this would be a legit way to write this comparison. And so all 3 of these would be fine. However, this one has none of those. This one has an extra little detail. It's got than that of Alexa's. And so now there's like 2 layers of possession in here, right? Alexa's, the apostrophe S, shows that Alexa has something. The that of, right? The what of, or the apartment of Alexa. The that of also communicates a degree of possession. And so if you have that of Alexa's, there are now like 2 things that are being possessed here. It would be something like Valerie's apartment's front door, right? Because now the front door is like 2 possession levels removed from Valerie, right? Or like the front door of Valerie's apartment is larger than that of Alexa's. Now that works because there are 2 layers of possession there. But here we can't have 2 layers because we're just talking about Valerie's apartment and not something that her apartment possesses. The that of phrase is tricky. And so what I often kind of tell my students is try taking out the that of and see if the comparison works. Look at option 3 now. Like, this is awful. Valerie's apartment is more spacious than Alexa. I feel like that's not very good. So clearly the that of changes things. And so what I say is, like, if you remove the that of and the comparison is broken, then that of probably needs to be there, right? If you remove the that of and the comparison works, then that of should not be there. It's kind of, if you studied how we teach the negation test for critical reasoning, find the assumptions, this is kind of, this is similar to that. Yeah, the question came up here about like how the double possession works. I'll just go ahead and write it. Let's see, the front door of Alexa's apartment is larger than that of, oh, I'm supposed to start with Valerie, sorry. You're getting confused. The front door of Valerie's apartment is larger than that of Alexa's. So what's happening here is Valerie's apartment, okay? Let me see if I can just kind of highlight the connective elements. So Valerie's apartment is kind of analogous to Alexa's, parentheses, apartment. And then we're comparing the front door of her apartment to the front door of Alexa's apartment. So this is how you would ever, if you ever had to, you would use that of combined with an apostrophe S. I've never seen that, but that's how it would work. So this is not correct because we're missing what the apartment possesses here. Let's clean this up. All right, sorry, number 4. Number 4 was close. Number 4 was close, but it was extra tricky. All right, number 5. All right, number 7 back here. Number 5, is a comparison proper, yes or no? Is the comparison proper in number 5? Good, more disagreement. This is good. So, I mean, the fact that I'm getting yeses and nos in chat tells me that, like, ideally, we're leaving these problems knowing a little bit more about how to tackle comparisons. Number 5 is not a good comparison, okay? Because what did we say about the word like, right? We said the word like compares nouns. And what you're kind of comparing here, you're comparing more than nouns. You're comparing like actions, right? You're comparing like the action of Khalil with the action of Khalil's sister. And when you're comparing actions or clauses, or basically just things other than nouns, you want to use the word as, okay? So something like, as did his sister, would be kind of the common way the GMAT would write this. And so now, did his sister is an action, basically his sister did, and Khalil aced the exam, as did his sister. They did the same 2 actions. So with like, remember, like compares nouns and as does not. As is what you use to compare clauses. Sometimes they can compare prepositional phrases. Generally, as compares clauses or actions. So watch out here. Okay, number 6, good comparison. Is this a good comparison? Yes or no? You guys are like not sure what to think anymore. You thought you had a bunch of these ones right. Number 6 is a good comparison, okay? You could also say, like, this is equivalent to I run faster than Sasha does. These mean the exact same thing. And so occasionally you can omit a word when it's not adding any clarity to the sentence, right? I run faster than Sasha. Sasha is a noun here. It follows the word than. What could Sasha be being compared to? The only thing is the person I. This is a legit comparison. If you had these 2 options on your answer choices, there would have to be something else that differentiates the two, because these are equally good comparisons. Number 7, is it a good comparison? Yes or no? Good question, actually, for number 6. Number 6, the question came in, are you comparing nouns or verbs, or nouns or actions? And we're actually comparing actions. The does would be your action, and it's implied here. Okay, so another kind of example of this sentence would be something like this. We'll go in a different color so we know it's slightly different, but I run as fast as Sasha. Or I run as fast as Sasha does. Yeah, and so the as fast as or faster than describes the running and the action of running. And so that's kind of what's happening here. Like, do you actually need to say the verb again? The GMAT would say no, but if you say it, it's also fine. Cool. Yeah, okay, so someone, yeah, this is good. And you know what, like, I'm gonna be honest, comparisons give me some trouble sometimes too. So it's good that I'm thinking through this with you guys. I think what's happening in number 6 here is, yeah, faster than Sasha does is parallel to I run, okay? And so that's kind of like what's implied here. Yeah, Sasha, I don't have does, but Sasha does would be parallel to I run, or comparable to I run. Cool, number 7. Number 7, I would say is grammatically correct, but ambiguous in meaning. Okay, and the reason is, right, we're not really sure, like, is Sarah, let me put it this way. Are we comparing Sarah to Jamie? Or are we comparing Sarah to Claire? And it's not really clear here. Right? Sarah likes to hang out with Jamie more than Sarah. Claire likes to hang out with Jamie more than Sarah. Might sound like Claire doesn't really like Sarah, so Claire would prefer to chill with Jamie. But it also could be like Claire likes to hang out with Jamie more than Sarah does. And so this comparison would be a little bit ambiguous. And so this is a situation where putting the word does at the end, maybe I'll just change the color back. Putting the word does at the end makes this sentence better, because there's some ambiguity here. And by putting the word does here, Sarah does is now more parallel echoes Claire likes. And so this meaning now implies that, like, Sarah doesn't really like to hang out with Jamie that much. So in number 6, it's not ambiguous at all, right? The only thing that Sasha could be echoing is the I. But here, Sarah could be echoing kind of 2 different names. And so the added word would help. Some things to kind of be aware of. Yeah. All right, so another question came in. These are good, and these are getting me thinking. Another question came in with number 6. Let's see. Oh, actually, while I have this, while we're on number 7, because a good question just came in. In number 7, can we say more than with Sarah? And I like this. Yeah, Zoo, I like this option because now with Sarah is parallel to, like, with Jamie. And now it's very clear that you're comparing you're saying Claire would prefer to hang out with Jamie, then she would prefer to hang out with Sarah, because with Sarah now echoes with Jamie, and now those two elements are like tied together in the comparison. I think that would be okay. It would be different. That's a different meaning than saying more than Sarah does. So the with Sarah would be parallel to with Jamie, and Sarah does would balance out Claire likes, and that's how you could be more clear with those two answers. That's great. That's awesome. I love it. Okay, question came in on number 6. Would this be wrong? I run like Sarah. Would it be wrong? I don't love it, but I think, first of all, a sentence like this on the JMA would never exist because it's too short. But I'm trying to think, I think this is a little ambiguous. If you're trying to compare I or you, I don't know who's saying this anymore, with Sarah, you would say, like Sarah, I run. Okay. If you're trying to say that the way you run is similar to the way, like maybe Sarah runs like this, and you also kind of run like that, you wouldn't want to use like there, because you're describing the action of how they run. All right, so you'd say I run as Sarah does, like in the way that Sarah does. I run as Sarah does. But if you were just trying to say like, oh, the two of you both run, and that's why you're similar, like Sarah, I do this. Like his mother, John has fiery red hair. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to say here. I run like Sarah. I talk like Sarah. I think it's what's implied there is I talk like Sarah does, and that's improper because those are actions, and so you'd want to say I talk as Sarah does. I run similar. Okay, so now we're going to I run similar to Sarah. To me, that's the same thing as I run like Sarah. So I would still kind of have a problem with it. I think this is kind of where you kind of bump up against these ideas. Like I know what this means, but technically, I don't think it's correct. And maybe I would get some pushback from other people. Similar to Sarah, I run. If you're saying similar to, you're comparing two nouns, and so the best way to compare these two nouns is to put the nouns as close together as possible. It's kind of like noun modifiers, like the principles of modifying nouns. It's all about putting the modifier as close as possible. And if you're saying that you are like Sarah, then you'll want to put those two nouns as close as possible. And the best way to do that is not put the verb in between it. I would still prefer, I'm still preferring the second option to the first one. Yeah. And then you say like the way I run is similar to the way Sarah runs, because now we're talking about ways or methods or techniques and things like that, and those are nouns. But I think this kind of makes it sound like it's an action and not as great. Guys, this is like you're running up, you're treading the limits of my comparison acumen. I will just be very honest with that. Maybe I can look it up a little bit and see what happens. Cool. I've got a couple practice questions to look at with you, but first I just want to go ahead and run through these signal words. Guys, one of the keys to tackling comparison problems is to know like what are the elements that you're comparing and do they line up? Okay, are they logically comparable? Are they apples to apples or apples to oranges at least, right? If it's apples to poverty, if it's Mary to, if you're comparing Mary to Adam's car, that's a bad comparison. But if you're comparing Mary to Adam, that's fine. Okay. But we know to look for comparisons when we see these signal words, and signal words are a huge help. They basically help us avoid those deer in the headlight looks, right? You know the feeling when a sentence correction question pops up and you're like, I don't know where to start, right? If we can find any of these signal words, we have an in to the problem, and then we can actually gain some traction and move forward. Cool, let's take a look at some problems. I've got a handful of them. Let's take a look at this one first. I'll give you a minute and a half on the clock. It's been a minute. I'll give you a little bit more time here. It's been a minute and a half. Let's go ahead and pause it there. Guys, I think just the key to this problem is catching the first word, right? If like is a signal word for comparisons, then so is unlike. Like means similar to, unlike means dissimilar to, right? And so the idiom here is unlike X, Y. Like, it's like John, his mother. John would be the X element, his mother would be the Y element. You can compare them because they're both people. So we're looking for something along those lines here, unlike X, Y, and we're given the X element. Let me just go ahead and highlight this with the right colors. We're given the X element as a typical automobile loan, right? Unlike X, unlike a typical automobile loan. And so once we get this structure, we can predict that the Y element needs to echo this concept, right? So unlike a typical automobile loan, an atypical automobile loan does this, right? Or unlike a typical automobile loan, a typical loan for buying a plane is like this, right? But it has to be some other type of loan. And so what we can do is I'm going to ignore this modifier here that describes a typical automobile loan. Unlike a typical automobile loan, which requires 15 to 20% down payment, and we arrive at our Y element, the lease loan buyer. I would agree in a sense that a typical automobile loan is unlike a lease loan buyer. They're so unlike, you can't compare them at all, right? This is a person, this is like a contract, all right? And those are not comparable. So we're gonna have to get rid of A. Now, ideally what we're looking for here is some other type of loan, and only answer E presents that, right? Answer B is kind of close, but can anyone tell me what makes option B problematic? I don't love the width. I think the width is problematic. I would seem like you're comparing prepositional phrases and not nouns. Yeah, with like and unlike both compare nouns. And what is the noun in B? The noun in B is buying. Yeah, what kind of buying is it? Oh, it's lease loan buying. But this is like a gerund, and that's the noun. So unlike a typical automobile loan, this type of buying, with this type of buying, there's no requirement. This is the problem. Yeah, we just want lease loan. C says we're talking about buyers. D, for the lease loan buyer, those are our nouns, and these are the wrong types of nouns. We need a lease loan only answer. It gives it to us. This is a one split problem. That's it. You can get this if you feel good about two things. One is just, do you feel good about recognizing your markers? Like when you see the word unlike, do you understand it's making a comparison? And two, once we find that marker, just make sure the two elements are both the same quality of nouns. That's it. Let's take a look at another one. I made this one up today. Maybe if you know the official guide well enough, you might know which problem I'm basing this off of, but I'll give you a minute and a half to think through it. It's been a minute 15 here. All right, I've gotten 4 answers and 3 of them are different. Do I have a poll option here? Can't remember if I do. I do. All right, guys, go ahead and launch or fill out the poll. What are we thinking here? Give me your best vote. Good stuff. I already have 18 votes, 19 votes. Good job, guys. Cool. All right, I've already got about 30 of the votes in. That's pretty good. Let's go ahead and end the poll. Yeah. Maybe you guys can see it. I know you won't be able to see this on YouTube, but answer B has 0 votes. Answer A has 0 votes. Answer B has 43%. Answer C is 27%. Answer D has 13%. Answer E has 17%. So answer B is in the lead and answer A is getting no love. I'm interested in knowing why nobody likes answer A. Can someone call out one thing that's wrong with answer A? I thought answer A was like pretty decent. Someone explain to me why answer A is wrong. Compares eardrums to all other animals. It's missing that. I'm curious about the that, because I actually don't see any of the answer choices with the that. I see, Robert. I see. Gotcha. Those, got it. Cool. Yeah, so we've got the comparison issue happening here, and again, we want to be sensitive to comparison markers, right? We want our eyes and ears to respond more sensitively to comparison markers than the eyes and ears of any other GMATer, right? And so, what are we comparing in this sentence? I think it's like a little. I mean, you guys are just straight up saying it's bad. You're saying any other animal is being compared to the eardrums of the greater wax moth. By the way, this is true. I did research today. I found this out, which is really cool. Yes, they can hear sounds up to, I think, 300,000. Like, you know, the frequency is 300,000 hertz, which is far higher than the human ear can hear. But yeah, we're comparing the eardrums of these moths and how they respond to sound waves to any other animal. And that's going to be an issue. We need to compare, like our stand, our lane thing. We're going to compare the eardrums of moths to the eardrums of other animals. Or we're going to compare moths to other animals. And we kind of have to pick one or the other. Answer A tries crossing this up. And so answer A is going to be wrong. Cool. So answer B had the most votes. So I guess the onus is on the people who picked answer B to tell me why the other ones are wrong. And if you picked answer C, D, or E, get into chat and tell me why B is wrong. Just say, this answer is wrong because of this, right? Answer X is wrong because of this reason. Tell me. Gianluigi, tell me what's wrong with that word. What's wrong with the word it in your mind? Mm-hmm. C is wrong because of them. It should be plural. Okay. Cool. Well, I think the next thing that's popping up here is this pronoun issue. And even though it's not pronoun day, there's a couple sentences that have pronoun issues in there. Let's take a look at the it versus them. Because pronouns are another great split. Like whenever we talk about signal words for parallelism and comparisons, pronouns have awesome splits, and awesome signal words. So it versus them is a great one. I think what we want to do here is think about the meaning, right? Allowing what to escape from a hungry bat, right? So in this sentence, what's escaping from a hungry bat? Whose ultrasonic probes alert the moth to danger. The only thing that's escaping from the hungry bat is the moth, right? And I think in every single answer choice, if I copy and pasted right earlier today, it's a singular moth. And so I think we need to refer to the moth with an it. Okay, like what would the them be referring to? The only thing the them could refer to, I guess, are the sound waves, and the sound waves aren't escaping from a hungry bat, or the eardrums, and the eardrums aren't really escaping. The eardrums are like part of the moth that escapes, but the eardrums are not actually doing the escaping. So I think this is a case where we want to use this pronoun and then say, okay, I need to figure out what is actually doing the escaping. Meaning wise, it has to be the moth. The moth is singular, and therefore I can't use a plural pronoun. And that should knock out C and E. And then I just realized I've made a mistake in one of these answer choices. But the answer D can't be right because it says they allows it. I meant to put they allow it, and that's what I get for making up my own problems. So what if even if I had they allow it? What's wrong with answer D? Can you come up with what's wrong with answer D? Yeah, it's the same bad comparison as answer A, right? Again, we've got more sensitively than. And we're talking about comparing it to an animal. The eardrums of this moth respond more sensitively than other animals. That's going to be a problem, a bad comparison, and that leaves answer B. Let's try to check out the elements in answer B to make sure that it's legit. Like allowing it, yeah, it is the bat, so that works. But look at the elements in the comparison. Let me just clean up the board here. Just like too much stuff on here. Let's clean up the board and just confirm that answer B does things correctly. I hope there's not a typo in the middle of answer B somewhere. It's going to ruin me. More sensitively than tells us we've got a comparison. What are we comparing here? I know a lot of you are saying like, yeah, those of is important. Yeah, those of the eardrums of the greater wax moth. Yeah, that's what kind of what we're comparing. The eardrums of the moth to the eardrums or those of any other animal. Yeah, that's a great question. So this was Aditi has a question in chat, and it just came to me, so it's private, but it's such a good question. I'm gonna call it out, and it's this question: why is it than do those of instead of just than those of? Like, why do I need the word do here? Do I need the word do? Am I saying the word do too much? Is it making everyone uncomfortable? What's up with the word do? Okay, so I think Gauri's got a good answer. The do refers to the verb respond. Yeah. It's like a pronoun verb. I don't know what to call it, proverb. That's actually a thing. But the word do basically takes the place of this noun. Like, do we want it? Do we need it? I think the GMAT would prefer it. And the reason they prefer the do is similar. I find myself talking with signal words of comparisons when I'm not meaning to. But it's similar to that last sentence when we had the 7 sentences and it was like Claire likes to hang out with Jamie more than Sarah. It's like, are we comparing Sarah to Claire? Or are we comparing Sarah to Jamie? I know we're comparing Sarah to something. And so in this problem, I think it's pretty apparent that we're comparing those of, or the eardrums of other animals to the eardrums of the greater wax moth. But what if the do here changed to 2? What if the do is actually 2? Well, then you might think that you're saying the eardrums of the greater wax moth respond to sound waves more sensitively than they respond to these other nouns, right? Like, I mean, I think logically, the eardrums of other animals are not really comparable to sound waves. But what if they said like the eardrums of the greater wax moth respond to sound waves more sensitively than to light waves? That's another possible comparison. And so I think because this is a noun, and you're not sure if you're comparing this noun to here or to this other noun, the phrase do clears that up. And it says like, oh, these nouns actually perform an action. And that is analogous to how these eardrums perform an action. So that's why I believe the do is going to be preferred on these answer choices. Yeah, it's good stuff. There's one other split in here that we didn't really bring up, but it's worth kind of mentioning. And let me just go ahead and write 2 sentences out for you. And I don't know if this is true anymore, but he used to be really fast, the Usain Bolt. He's that important. He gets an article in front. Usain Bolt is faster than any human on Earth versus Usain Bolt is faster than any other human on Earth. And this is another split that exists in this problem. It actually doesn't exist in the one in the official guide that I modeled this one off of. But the GMAT will always prefer this one because you can't say Usain Bolt is faster than any human on Earth because he's one of the humans on Earth. Unless you think he's just so fast that he's got to be an alien. But no, if Usain Bolt is faster than any human on Earth, that implies he's faster than himself, and that's impossible. So we'd have to compare Usain to all the other people on Earth, not to all the people, including himself. So that would be something else you can look out for, and I've seen that split on real problems. Cool, we'll do one more. because you have been very, very responsive in chat, and I appreciate it. Let's do this last one, and then we'll call it a day. Maybe this one was too easy for you guys. It's been 1 minute. Notice that there's some does action in some of these, right? Like, do we want the does again? Or maybe the does is not what we want here. Cool. That's been about 1.5 minutes. Most of the answer choices here are in agreement here. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and maybe we'll be able to do one more if I move through this quickly. The answer here is answer E. Okay. I think there's a couple reasons to make some eliminations. And I said on the last problem that like pronouns might be an issue in some of these other problems. I don't know who they are in A. Presumably the Hollanders. But you know, a rule with pronouns is like if you see a pronoun, it needs to refer to something specific in the sentence, and there does not replace any plural noun in the sentence. Same thing with B. Like, who are they? Like we know we're talking about the Hollanders. The GMAT doesn't allow that. And same thing with C. It's going to be a problem. You can use its because it refers to Holland, the country, and there refers to the people of Holland, and that's never like stated here. So it would be the preferable pronoun here, and that could be a way to get rid of A, B, and C. But I think you're also going to run into comparison issues, right? And we've got again this such a critical phrase, a larger percentage than, right? It's in every sentence. Larger percentage of this stuff than. And then the other element. And so what we want to do here is take a look. I think one of the easiest ways to do these is look at what follows and. Look at what follows than. The United States. And you can see, okay, the United States is being compared to Holland. And if you want to kind of continue this, say like, oh, Holland spends versus the United States does, right? Where does kind of like takes the place of that verb. Mm-hmm. And Holland spends a bunch of it on defending its coast, and the United States does on military defense. Okay, and so we've got some pretty good kind of comparison elements here. But if you take a look at, you know, for instance, answer D. Okay, we've got, you know, spends a larger percentage of its gross national product on this than. Take a look at what's being compared in answer D and why it's not as great a comparison. To me, it's harder to see what this noun is being compared to. If you're saying the military defense spending is parallel to Holland, and think about what you're saying here. The military defense spending spends a percentage of its gross national product, right? I don't think you want to say the military defense spending spends. Okay. If you want to say the military defense spending is actually parallel to another noun or compares itself to another noun, I don't know, are you comparing it to this? Defending its coasts from rising seas, right? Holland spends more of its money defending its coast from rising seas than it spends on the military defense of the United States. Like, yeah, it makes sense. Holland is spending more money protecting its own country than on the United States military defense. But this one's got to be answer E, because answer E gets the comparison right, kind of down to the word, right? The United States spends on military defense. That's being compared to how Holland spends its gross national product on defending its coasts. So I've got one more for you, because you guys answered that one so quickly. It was like pretty much unanimous. So I have this other one that's pretty difficult, and it's from the official software, as are a bunch of these other ones. So I'll go ahead and give you a minute and a half to think about this one too. Yeah, this one's getting more variety in the answer choices here. I think I've gotten maybe every answer except one. Someone said they've seen this before. Yeah. Is this one of these infamous problems that like everyone has seen because it's terrifying? It's been about a minute and a half. Yeah, single underline word. Is that a good sign or a bad sign? I don't know. It means like you don't have much room for error. You either get it or you don't. Do I just want to give this one away? I don't know. I mean, I see the word than, okay, and more than, that's our kind of signal. But whenever we see the word than, we know we're making a comparison. And I think what I like, the way that I would prefer to tackle this is, it's like in parallelism, if I have a list and if I have this structure X and Y, to me it's kind of like when I get to the word and, I know that I'm in the middle of a parallelism, and it's kind of annoying to like back myself up and figure out where it started. So when I see the word and, I just say, okay, I know I'm in parallelism now, and that means whatever follows the word and needs to balance something that came before it. Okay, and then I'll go kind of with that in mind, go try to hunt for what could possibly be, the earlier element that is parallel to Y. And so I like to do that with the word than. Okay, and so what I'm going to do in answer A is I'm going to say, okay, if than's just the marker, then under it needs to be compared to something earlier. Okay. And so let me just go ahead and scan here and see if I can find something that's comparable to under it. And if I'm going to compare something to under it, I'd compare that to over it. Over the age of 30, then under it. Yeah, it here is the pronoun that replaces the age of 30. More babies were born to women over the age of 30 than under the age of 30. And I think that one works. Okay, so that doesn't mean it's the only one that works, but I think that one works, so I'm going to keep it. If you look at option B, now I need born under it. Than born under it. I need born under it to be comparing itself to something earlier. And the issue in B is that I can find like born over it, but this phrase is really important, right? Over the age of 30 describes the women, right? It's a modifier of the women. And if you take out that phrase, that like really essential phrase to women, now you're saying like more babies were born to women over the age of 30 than born under it. More babies were born under it. More babies were born under what? Under the age of 30? All babies are born under the age of 30. They're born under the age of 1 minute, right? And so this phrase is really critical. So I don't think, I'm looking for the like kind of the linked phrase born under it, and it's broken earlier in the sentence. And I think that's going to be a problem. If you look at option C, then they were under it. What am I going to compare to the they were under it? That's an independent clause. I don't find a viable first element in this comparison. Like, maybe it's like women were over it, but I need a verb. Women were over it, then they were under it. I still don't even understand what comparison would be being made there. So again, I'm looking after the word than for this phrase, and I'm saying, okay, I need to find something that can balance with that phrase, and I'm having a hard time doing it. There had been under it. Well, one of the things that the had been in both D and E brings up is whenever you see like had been, that's what we call the past perfect. And the past perfect is used to, I say used to situate multiple events in the past, one in front of the other. And I'm not trying to say that one thing happened in the past and then later something else happened in the past. And so there's no real room for had been born. I also don't think you can find anything kind of comparable to there had been under it. Right? Maybe it's just something like there had been more babies born to women over the age of 30 than there had been babies born to women under it. Robert, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Is the why phrase a clause? Oh, there had been under it. I mean, I think, I'm not even sure at that point. I'd like to say there had been what? Like, I don't really know what the subject is in that clause. So that would be hard for me to determine. And so the same thing for E, right? Had been born under it. I would need had been born over it, then had been born under it. Like I need another phrase that's kind of similar structurally to this. And there just are no options for that. So I think answer A is the only one that gets this right? You have the than, and then you have this little phrase under it. And it does have kind of a companion earlier, and it's the only one that does. And so I think that's the way that I would proceed through this problem. I think I understand what you mean by all of these. Like if someone had said B, just like, in casual conversation, I wouldn't blank. I would just like, I would know exactly what you meant. But when it comes to, grammar on the GMAT, we need to be a little bit more, I don't know, strict about all of those elements. That one's pretty tough. I only got a few answer A's in chat. And even one of the persons who said they'd seen this before did not say answer A. So potential takeaway here. Cool, guys. I think we're going to go ahead and close it down here. Just a reminder, take a look at some of these other free options. Come back to the free GMAT prep hours that are upcoming. I don't really know when they are, but we try to have one like every 2 weeks or so. So you can go check out the calendar. And yeah, we'd love to see you at the next free GMAT prep hours or in a session 1 class or in session 2 class. If you're going to do the whole thing, that would be great too. Cool, let's go ahead and close things down. Robert, I know you did have one question for me, so go ahead and hit me with that. Oh, Sharfel, that sounds great. And Gianluigi, if you have a question too, you can go ahead and ask it. I'll go ahead and keep the recording going in case people on YouTube want to see these. But one of the questions came in was, I tend to take a little bit longer on CR. Thanks, Megna. I tend to take a little bit longer on CR. It takes like 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes and 45 seconds. How do I get closer to 2 minutes? I think a lot of that comes from being able to like predict what the right answer is going to look like before you look at them. I think a lot of that comes from having analyzed enough bad arguments to kind of to recognize their faults. Right? There's a handful of like really bad argument types, and I think a vast majority of the bad arguments, the problematic arguments you see in critical reasoning are related to these kind of templates of how to create bad arguments, right? Arguments related to causation, arguments related to, issues of sample size and selection bias and stuff like that. Bad arguments related to, making conclusions about profit, but you only have information about revenue. I think if you study a lot of CR, you'll start kind of recognizing the types of flaws in arguments, and then once you recognize the types of flaws, it becomes faster. You become faster at thinking what the right answer would look like to close that gap, that kind of attacks the flaw, all that stuff. Thanks, Rose. So that's kind of be where I would suggest you go, Robert. Just like start doing a bunch of critical reasoning problems and like get into them and analyze them and like start figuring out like what kind of bad argument is this? Why didn't I recognize that? What are the signs here? And how will I be able to recognize it next time? You can also try like creating some of your own bad arguments that are, somewhat similar to the ones you're looking at. See if you can like come at the questions from the other side, like from the test writer side of things. I've worked with a student here. And one of the things that kind of like worked for him was like trying to create his own GMAT questions, so he could like kind of start, building in the kind of the tougher issues from the other side, and that way you're more sensitive to them when you see. Better to answer all questions and get more wrong, or get more right but leave a few and run out of time. That kind of depends on the degree to which you're leaving some blank and the degree to which you're getting some wrong. But big picture, I would say like we want to put an answer down for all the questions. Don't want to leave any unanswered. I'm going to say that as like a very like a blanket recommendation. Goal number 1 is to finish the section. Okay. Goal number 2 is to finish the section without having to guess randomly at the end, but like at least getting a shot at all the questions. Yeah. Let me see what some of these other ones. Someone said they're struggling with reading comp. Where should I start from? What resources? I'm going to say this, and this goes for all question types, but the best problems to study, for the GMAT are all the official guide resources. Okay, so the 2021 book is out. I don't know where it is. I just put it down here. I don't know where I did with it, but the 2021 official guide is out recently. That would be a good place to start. Of course, you could start with other books like the 2020 official guide, previous years. There's also the not the companion books, the review books. They're like slightly smaller, and they're only on quant or only on verbal. But the official guide questions are your best resources overall. If you're really struggling with reading comp, then you might want to back things down and look at kind of a more like a fundamental book. So the resources we have there are our foundations of verbal, depending on, just kind of if you need to start at the very, very beginning, or our all the verbal guide that has some, a handful of chapters on reading comp and ways to think about, how to handle your first read through, if you should be taking notes, what you should be thinking of the first time through, the different question types, how to kind of go about eliminating wrong answers, and all the processes there. Cool. And then last one, I'll answer one more question, then we'll close things up. Is it better to work on your weaknesses or study new material? Wow. That was a good question. You guys are asking better questions than I was asking today. That was a good comparison I made there, by the way. Is it better to work on your weaknesses? It depends on what the new material is, okay? I would say that there are some question topics that I just don't think are worth some people's time. Of course, I did an entire free GMAT prep hour 2 weeks ago on this, but like I talked about probability a couple of weeks ago, and you know, for a lot of people, you can do perfectly well in the GMAT and never like need to worry about dealing with probability questions or combinatorics questions. Those are like they tend to be more advanced. And I would say, you know, if you have a lot of room for improvement on some of the other areas like fraction decimal percent problems and exponents and divisibility and, you know, quadratics and just linear equations in general like word problem translation, like I would much rather you just keep hammering that than add on new stuff. But, you know, it depends on like exactly the breadth that you've covered so far. If you've only covered like a couple topics, you're going to need to eventually cover more. So it also depends on where you are in your study. If you're like very close to the end of your study, like if you're 2 weeks out from exam day, I would say, you know, you probably should just be refining some of the weaker areas just to see like, can I pick up 10 points here? Can I pick up 10 points there? And only do that for a couple areas and then just like let the rest of it go. But yeah. Cool. Maybe I'll see you guys in a couple weeks in November. Until then, I hope you guys stay safe and healthy. And if you take your GMAT between now and then, good luck. Thanks for watching, everyone.